And we're live.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Welcome to the next meeting for the Spending Affordability Advisory Committee. We are here today to talk about recommendations to put into the report. So over the past few weeks, we've gone through a number of presentations, and thank you to everyone who has presented to the committee, and thank you for everyone for the great questions that have been asked during the meetings. And now is time for us to kind of put together some thoughts to put into a report with the plan that over the next few weeks, we will draft this report, bring it back to the committee for review, and then we'll vote on the report and submit that. If everybody remembers from the executive order, we have four basic tasks for the committee. One is the projections of general fund revenues for the upcoming fiscal year, which will be fiscal year 2025. A recommended level of new county debt, the general obligation or GO bonds authorization, an analysis of the long-term fiscal outlook, including the multi-year projections on revenue, and then any other findings and or recommendations that the committee deems appropriate. These recommendations could be around long-term capital improvement, long-term spending, long-term revenue, any of those different things, fees. The committee's used this in years past to kind of cover a lot of those different things. So with that, we'll just go ahead and move into the discussion. Any questions from the committee members today about these items? Okay, great. So today we'll be voting on the different recommendations, and I think everybody knows who the voting members of the committee are. So we'll be using that to go through the process of adding the different recommendations that we'll be putting in the report and writing. And then this will be the upcoming schedule. I'm thinking we can get through most of these recommendations in the next couple of hours. Usually these meetings go a little quicker in the past just because everybody's had all the material and has thought about it. So we may not have the meeting on Wednesday the 14th because of the fact that we're going to get through that if we get through everything today. But if we don't, we'll come back again on Wednesday and finalize those recommendations. We will get a draft of the report submitted a few days prior to the full committee meeting. That'll give everybody a chance to read that report, go through it in detail, and come back with any recommendations to the changes. And then we will vote on that meeting and the final report on the 26th of February. So 2 weeks from today, we'll go through that process. So just, I think I talked about this as on the onset, kind of a context. We've recommended over the past few years constrained, prudent, and proactive budgeting. And really this is due to just the shifting demographics that have been occurring in Howard County over the past few years, the slowing growth trends, and the shrinking land for development. That being said, other factors come into play that drive revenue and expense growth. And so as much as we try to discuss, what we believe to be the revenue or expense growth over the next few years, there's lots of factors that go into it that we haven't even seen yet. When we went through the the pandemic a few years ago, we noticed some big changes in those numbers that were just unexpected when we were working on the report a few weeks prior. So we're going to do the best we can here as a group to put some good recommendations in front of the county executive with the report, but the constrained, prudent, proactive budgeting is just so that we don't get ahead of ourselves as we continue to grow and expenses are going up, and we want to make sure everybody is aware of the challenges. You can go to the next slide. So we'll start with the bond authorization recommendation. The modeling that we've seen in the meetings shows $95 million. That's just for modeling purposes. We've been holding down those numbers because over the past few years we've been exceeding some of the recommended debt levels as a percentage of overall revenues. These numbers here are just to kind of get the conversation started from the members of the committee on recommended bond authorization. I think the last few years have been the actual authorizations have been in the mid $70 million range. So I'll open it up to the committee with any recommendations. Holly, anything you want to add before we have a dialogue around the bond authorization?
Sure, thank you. And Steve, you're right. Last 5 years, for the last 5 years in a row, the county actually budgeted authorized bond is close to like close to 75 million a year. So that was largely a little bit higher than what the committee has been recommending, but historically a low level because of we were mindful about the overall debt indicators on that there. So this year, like we're revisiting here and then just looking for people's recommendations here.
Very good. Any members of the committee want to kick off the discussion?
Yeah, I'll bite. Steve Hunt here.
Hey,
yeah.
Steve.
Hey, Steve. How you doing, man?
Good.
Good. Yeah. Hey, it's almost baseball season. Just for I know we went over this in one of the presentations. I don't know, Holly, if you could pull this up, but what might be helpful to especially those who haven't been involved as long as some of us is, I think there was a slide in one of the presentations that showed the projection of where our debt service was, and I believe, Holly, that was based on 95.
Yes, I think what you let me try to get that. I think what you referred to is finance department made a presentation at our last committee meeting updating different debt indicators, and a critical one means like debt service as a percentage overall revenue. That projection was actually showing the prediction is a debt indicator will be below the policy target of 10 policy ceiling of 10%. And also that's assumed 95 million geo bonds in the next several years. I think that's what you refer to.
Right.
But let me try to find that information, which is really very positive. Thanks to everybody's kind of recommendation and fiscal discipline in the past several years. That's what people have been doing hard to bring the debt capacity to where it needs to be. So it does actually looks the maximum level will be 95 million, will still be under our policy target.
Right. I guess my thinking was, and you're right. I think the conservative approach has allowed us to do that probably quicker than I think we had thought several years ago. But I guess my question, just to add to this discussion to give people something to think about is how close are we in terms of how that might affect our decisions? Oh, there you go. So they had it based on 90. Obviously, the interest rates do what they do, but I mean, they were assuming 90 million, and we were just under the line. So we certainly don't want to play with that kind of fire going at 90. But I guess that maybe that opens the discussion to others to, as we're deliberating on which one of the numbers that you posted, Steve, on the other slide, which number would be the more appropriate one based on this.
It could be any number, Steve. I just had some numbers on the slide just to get everybody thinking.
Sure.
I've found in the past, if I put just a blank question there, it didn't start the conversation. So I just wanted to have some numbers. But, it sounds like we've been in the mid 70s the past few years, and that's helped us get down in that debt service as a percentage of revenue as we've been modeling it out to get below that 10%. And if that's something that continues to work, it's a little bit more constrained. It's going to have to hold back some of the capital investment that we're doing and make sure that that's moderated and planned. But we'll get to that conversation a little bit later. So I would just look for, if there's anybody, those are really good thoughts, Steve. I'm just wondering if there's anybody who wants to add to this part of the conversation as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hi guys, it's Todd. Refresh my memory though. I seem to remember last year talking about in our projections being over the 10% number and racing toward the 11% number in our report from last year. Is that correct?
I have to pull the report, but last several years, including last year's, it's over 10% at some point in the long-term projections there.
Right,
Um,
right.
but I remember last couple years things has been improving. Last year was already a pretty significant improvement from prior year in terms of actual performance. That's because in recent years we have kept authorizing at a relatively prudent lower level of debt, and eventually kind of play a effect there. And that's combined with the fact that revenue have been growing at a faster speed than we thought. So everything
Right. That was my thinking too, was that our revenues have grown so much more rapidly than we
right,
had expected that, of course, this ratio is benefiting from that.
right.
Um,
Good point.
and I don't know if I don't know if if it's being driven more by revenues than by moderating our debt issuance. And I don't know if that we really need to quantify it.
If we had like some sort of, scale where we could kind of map that out and say, okay, what's,
Right.
this is only a couple, kind of linear, right? As opposed to saying, well, where is it? But it's still pretty close, right? I mean, even with,
Right.
we're still at 90 million, we're still flirting with the 10%, and any small shift in revenue in my mind could drive us to be back up at that 10%. So it probably makes sense to see a few years of this number moving down, as opposed to saying, oh, we just got below it, let's jump. But that's my own personal opinion.
No, I'm totally in agreement with you. I would just make sure that we're not overstating the fact that it's our fiscal prudence that's led to the ratio improvement. I want to
I
make
think
sure
it's both.
Yeah.
To your
If I
point.
can just quickly add, I think all the things you're talking about is all three. One, we estimate $90 million, but at 4.5% interest rate. We've never issued 4.5%. So when we issue, now those debts are known. I think last time was 3.5%. That was last year. So this year, we don't know what the rates are going to be yet, but we're equally looking at that same range. So that helps. So we're dropping 100 basis points from our estimates, so which now factors in. And then, of course, not issuing $90 million is another factor. And I think what Dr. Son said, the revenue is another major factor. So all combined is what brought the rate down. So it's not just one factor. So
yeah, but if I would, to Todd's point, and just for the purpose of everybody, revenue probably has a bigger piece of it, just because it's one of the two pieces of the calculation, in driving that down. So Todd, to your point, it's probably a little bit more driven by revenue than the other piece, which is why you might want to see it be more sustained for a period of time before you say, hey, that number would be comfortable going up.
Right. No, I agree, and I'm glad, Ruff, you reminded me of the interest rate issue, because we
We had
discussed
a long
that
conversation about that last year.
Yeah, we had a lot. Yeah, exactly. And that's are we BSing people by using a 4.5% rate when we know we've never issued at 4.5%?
not really.
Well,
It's a good conservative way to look at it, though, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, because if we ever have to issue and we budgeted on a lower, now we're tying the county down, we're going to come back saying, well, our debt ratio is going to go up because the rates were higher. So this is really where you want to be.
Right. No, I get that. It's just, I want to make sure that we don't get fingered with, hey, you guys are leading us down a road, meaning us, but from policymakers, you guys are leading us down this road of thinking that, we're about to breach the 10% and maybe get to 11%. Because I remember even making that statement in a presentation last year.
It was a couple of years ago when we really thought we were heading in that direction, shortly after the courthouse.
Right.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
actually exceeded that
predicted a
10%
spike.
for 2
Yeah.
years. Yeah. You see that?
I want to be fair. I mean, obviously, I would always argue for fiscal prudence, but I want to be fair and not not forecast a percentage that's artificially inflated, and we know it going in. But that's what we're going to say. And
Well, let me
Look at the chart though, Steve and
sorry, go ahead,
Todd.
Steve.
Look at the chart real quick.
no,
So,
I know.
Notice the drop in debt service from 24 to 25 to 26 before it goes back up again.
Yes.
That's a big reason for the drop, right? So
Yeah,
there's some
those
stuff
are real.
rolling off.
Those are real numbers, not percentages. So
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I wanted to see the slide to see how close we were to drive to the conversation. I think we got some good information. Todd, your point is very well taken about revenues, and obviously, I'm sorry, Rafe, I guess your point was about revenue, but and also the point, Todd, you made about the interest rate. The thing though is, as we look at all of those numbers, a lot of those are variables. Revenues can change. Something might happen. We hope and pray it doesn't, but something might happen that impacts that. Interest rates, who knows what the Fed's going to do? Maybe they go one way, maybe they don't. There is one number we can control, and we should keep this in mind when recommending that number, and that is the obligation bonds recommendation.
Yes, the dollar amount, the actual
Yeah,
dollar
that's the
amount.
one we can control.
That's right. Yep.
And we've always stayed a little lower because the number ends up being a little higher. But that's just my recommendation for the committee as they think through this. Any other discussion, or does anyone have an idea of what to recommend?
This is Richard, and I just have one question, which is, how is Ellicott, and I think we talked about it, and I apologize, I just couldn't find my notes. How are the Ellicott City bonds being handled again?
So Ellicott City bonds, there are we were able to authorize to apply and got federal WIFIA loan. So I don't know whether Rafael, you want to talk a little bit more on
They're in
that.
the total. It's listed there in the
That's included.
on the
All
sheet.
the loans, they're
Yes.
no matter whether it's geo bonds or other lower interest, better term loans, these are all including debt service calculation.
But we're all in our commitment to Ellicott City Safe and Sound, but we still don't have really a good idea of what it's going to cost, right?
That it does get updated every year. To put it that, because once you get further into this very complex project, then engineering contractors here,
Right.
then based on the market and engineering solution, it does get updated every year. I would say every time when we do it, we receive an estimate, but then this could get updated again. So I'm not going to say it's fixed currently.
But the 90 million a year round numbers that we're increasing our geo bonds by include the WIFIA bonds, but it includes the current estimate of Safe and Sound spending.
Right.
That was my question. Thank you.
Yeah, that's where I thought you were going, Richard, and I'm with you 100% on that, because I mean, if we're still talking about it being 150 million, when last year we were saying, well, it might be more like 300.
Okay, so here the notes actually said that this assumption is how much total annual issuanization in the future years on that, and also the WIFIA loan that was already factored in. But what's the components of the 90 million for any future years? It doesn't say. It's basically taught about affordability part, right? Assuming 90 million, but how much is for Ellicott City versus other project? It doesn't try to determine how to spend. It doesn't try to say, assuming each year we're going to authorize so much dollar amount there.
I was just confirming it's baked in.
But
It is.
And
It is
it
baked
is
in.
baked in.
Yes.
That was my question. And
Yeah, it is. It is.
But the real question is, if we're assuming 90 a year in additional issuances, and that assumes the current assumptions for Ellicott City Safe and Sound, and we know that we're way understated, then if we're going to hold the 90, Safe and Sound is going to squeeze everything out.
So it really depends.
It could, but we don't know that today, right? All we know
Right.
today is
Right.
that there's this piece that's there. And I understand, Todd, you're trying to kind of put that into the calculus of how we figure it out.
It's not even that. It's just that it's a caution. It's a,
Okay.
it's a caution just because
Then we should put some language on top.
No.
Ignoring the dollar amounts, we should put some language in the report around that.
Yeah, I don't know, but I guess we don't have the information enough to be able to say, oh, well, the original estimates were this, the new estimates are this. There's already a 30% bust and it's headed north. I don't know if we know that information, but
Well, I think what we can do is when we get to we're moving into the other recommendations. I'll put a note to bring that up during the other recommendations stuff.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yep.
It's Ellen. Can I just ask also about the concerns that were voiced about the fees not covering the maintenance of wastewater? And
that's getting beyond the
okay.
Go. We're in the go. That's why I'm trying. Let's hold that off till we get towards.
But if those have to go into go bonds as opposed to being covered by the fund, that does impact on what amount of money is going to be drawn, right? Because that's what the warning was.
That's true.
No, what it's going to impact is what those dollars can be used for, not necessarily what's going to be drawn, right? So
if
we're looking at the dollars that we can borrow, or recommending what we can borrow, ignoring what those dollars will be used for, and focusing on the debt metrics.
Yeah, because ultimately
whatever those dollars are used for, that needs to be balanced out by the policymakers. We're just saying, hey, based on the debt metrics we have, and the fact that we're trying to stay below 10% of revenue, giving all the other competing things, we believe the bond authorization level should be X. When we get into other recommendations, and you'll see it on a later slide, it's talk a little bit about the CIP program and kind of an overall plan for how we spread those things out, knowing there's going to be things that compete for those dollars. So when you're looking at things that, I'm not going to use the word necessary, but if you're looking at things that are maybe forward thinking and optional versus things that are required, you have to adjust your timing. Does that make sense, Ellen?
Yeah, but I guess I was just worried that because these are things that have in the past been, since 14, have been covered by the fund. And they were now saying there isn't enough money for the fund to continue to cover the debt service on the existing ones, as well as the fact that if we want to move forward with even 10% of what the outstanding need is there, we're going to have to dip into go bonds, which isn't it's something that anybody's had to think about before.
But that's
okay. I'm all right.
That's a solution, a potential solution. There are other solutions that aren't even being talked about, right? They're just saying, oh, if it goes into all overall fees, it goes into other areas to raise revenue, all those different things. It's saying based on things as they sit today, this is the only way to solve that. Well, there are other things out there that could, if they, we think about it, that could potentially solve it. Am I answering that the right way?
Okay.
Okay.
And just a question. Last year, what was the recommend? Was it 75?
I think last year it was 70.
65 was recommended by the committee.
And the authorization was 73. How much was the authorization last year, Holly?
I think it's close to 75, but
75. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's about 75.
Okay. So any recommendation from the committee?
I'm sorry, what were your three numbers again, Steve? I didn't commit that.
My three numbers were 65, 75, and 85, I believe.
I'm going to go with 65.
Okay.
Seconded. Richard.
So we have a motion and a second for 65 to be in the report. Are there any, is everybody supportive of that? Is there anybody who is against 65 being in the report?
I'm not against it, but I think we have to acknowledge the reality of where revenues are. And if I'm just worried that we start to lose credibility. That's all.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Todd.
I'd be more inclined to go to 75 because we're basically then acknowledging that revenues have not only gone up by well over what our estimates were in previous years' reports.
So
this
I'm not
report
trying
looks
to be a stickler for
Yeah.
any of this, but it's hard to do this on the WebEx call. But we had a motion and a second from the voting members of the committee, and if you're and then I asked if you were against it, and so if you're against it, vote no.
no.
Okay, thank you. Steve, are you also a no?
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other no's?
I'm a no.
I'm a vote of no also.
Who are these people?
Yeah,
Sorry.
please. Who are they?
Jimmy Jennings is a no.
Okay.
JC Hendrickson is a no.
Okay.
Can we have a discussion of the no's?
I have 4 no's, and right now, Barbara, unless I have another one, then the motion will have passed at 65.
Yeah, I'll also do a no.
Okay, so I have 5 no's. I have 12 voting members on here, so it's 7-5 right now. Unless I have any other no's?
So I have a no. Darius Ronnie.
Okay, so the no's continue to grow.
Yeah.
So now we're at 50-50, so the motion doesn't pass. Okay, is there another motion?
Yeah, I'll move for 75. This is Todd.
I'll second that.
75.
I'll second that.
All right. Do I have any no's for 75? Okay, 75 passes. Thank you. I appreciate it. And again, it's not easy to do when I can't see everybody's face and I'm trying to move through the WebEx. Holly, can you go to the next slide?
Yes. Hold on.
I lost the slides. I don't even see them anymore.
Can you still see it?
No, I can't
No.
see it.
They're not showing.
They're not showing.
Let me retry. I think somehow it's not showing anymore.
Sorry, I just gotta. There's Holly.
Minute. Let me try on that.
There we go. Okay.
Can you see it?
Yep.
And
We
this
did-
is the
let's-
one. This one
Yeah.
we just talked about, and the 75 million. Just to confirm, that's the one we just voted upon, correct?
Yes, the vote was
Okay.
for 75 million.
Okay, got it. So the
Okay,
next
and
one-
then the report consideration. I guess the next one I would move to would not be the annual over the long term. It would be next year. Holly, can you pull that slide up?
Oh yeah, hold on.
I think we missed that one. I think it was actually before.
Yeah,
There
it's
you go.
this one.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So the general fund revenue forecast for fiscal year 2025 is excluding one-time funding is 1.45 billion. The amount is an increase of about 4.5% over fiscal year 2024. Given that this is the closest estimate by the team to where we are right now, does anybody have any concern over this number being included in the report?
I'm going to defer to Richard. I'm fine with it.
Same here.
Move that we accept it.
All right, Barbara moves. Do we have a second?
Second.
I'll second.
All right. Anybody opposed? Great. Okay, now we'll move on to the long term. So the long-term fiscal outlook has us looking at looking in the out years at 3.3% growth annually over the next few years. That would be.
I'm sorry. Let me just say growth on average annually because it's not evenly. So just to be accurate. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry. I assumed it was average, but I apologize for not pointing that out. So 3.3% average growth annually over the next few years, based on the current outlook. And I'd like to hear any discussion from the committee on this. Dr. Clinch, Dr. Ronnie, you guys want to start with any comments?
I guess I would go is that if and this is Richard Clinch speaking, if personal income is projected to grow by 4%, and we saw, I can't remember which week, that the real estate taxes were growing well, and the median housing price is also increasing. So assessments and market are growing. Do we want to consider a higher number for operational growth?
So I can bring back the original slides. The 3.3% represent the average in the next 6 years. The next 3 years is actually higher than that because to realize the strong real property tax and income tax. But going forward, after 3 years on that, the property base was more assuming historical level. That's 2.some% a year. That's why the future years in the tail end of the next 6 years, kind of more moderate growth. That's where the 3.3%.
So you're getting a higher number over the next 3 years, lower number in years 4 through 6,
Correct,
and that's
correct.
where the 3.3 is coming from. Okay.
Right.
And if that's the case, I think we need to be a little careful when we say the next few years, because that's so
Yeah.
amorphous. I think we need to be a little more specific.
Let's say 6.
Yeah, over the next 5 or 6 years. I think that's, I mean,
Like
Well, this isn't you're right. You guys move whatever language you want to have the report, and we'll make sure that that's included. So it's really years 2 through 6, not the next 6 years.
right. It's really the 5 years beyond FY.
Next year. Got it. Okay. Well,
Then-
that's even clearer.
That's clearer. I would say that.
That's what's written there now.
Okay.
I like this language. There will be a recession at some point. We seem to have dodged it now. So yes, this addresses that.
Okay. All right. So do we have a motion on this?
Yeah, I motion Darius.
All right. Do we have a second?
I'll second Ellen.
Thank you. All right. Anybody opposed? Very good. Okay. Now the different report considerations, and these are not limiters, and they're also not necessarily to be included. They're just things to think through. And I'd like to, this is more kind of a list of things for the report as opposed to necessarily a vote. We can include these items and then we'll be voting on them on the 26th. I just want to kind of get that kind of catch-all list from the committee of things that we want to put in as any other recommendations the committee would have related to, kind of the fiscal responsibility of the county and over the next few years. So on here are fees, CIP, key stakeholders, sustainable financial plan, overall fund balance, managing OPEB. So open to dialogue from the committee on this.
Seems inclusive of our conversations to date. Richard Clinch.
Very good.
Steve, are you just looking for us to kind of sign off on the list, or to actually discuss each?
We can do both. We can discuss the list of people. These are kind of like the open items. We've usually put a list together and then tried to come up with language and then really dug into that language during the vote on the report. I just, have some things that are listed here based on the conversations, and to Dr. Clinch's point, this is kind of inclusive of what everybody's been talking about in the meetings and asking questions. But at the same time, is there something that's missed, something that committee members think, that's not something we really need to talk about right now because it was covered? That's really what I'm looking for. Does that make sense, Todd?
Yep. Because I think then, my focus would be on two issues, both related to the same thing, and that is the deferred maintenance on wastewater or stormwater management through the county. Because we're talking about the watershed fee on one side as a means of financing or funding the improvements or the maintenance, more accurately. And then at this level 1 through level 4 rated devices throughout the county. And when we talked about the watershed fees in that presentation, that's why I was asking so many questions on, wait a minute, is this supposed to fund it? Is it supposed to be dedicated fund and self-funding, or is it a policy decision that's how we want to try to do it? I don't want to create a situation where we have all these independent slivers that are, okay, this is funded by this and this is funded by that, and then we don't have to make decisions on overall prioritization. All we're trying to do is balance one line item or one task within the budget. And I don't think that's the way to go. I think the county needs to be making policy decisions on prioritization. And on this issue, it's very important.
That's a great way to put it, Todd.
I want the county to have to say, we've ignored this for a while. We need to take care of it, and we're going to step up, and this is how we're going to do it. I don't want the knee-jerk reaction to be, oh, well, we have $29 million a year in spending, and we only have 9 million or 7 million, whatever the number was, in revenues. So we have to increase the fees by 4 times to cover the spending needs. I don't think that's right. I think the policymakers need to make a judgment on, all right, we have to do this. Yes, we know we have to do it. This is what it's going to squeeze out.
So your comment is less around the stormwater management and more around overall deferred maintenance and how that's managed. Because, we've been talking for years about roads. We've been talking for years about other types of deferred maintenance.
Yeah.
I go back to the courthouse discussion and the fear that deferred maintenance on the courthouse would be something that, you'd spend all this money and suddenly we'd have to build another courthouse. And so it's really an overall, how do we manage deferred maintenance as a county, as a community, or maintenance, if you will, as opposed to deferred maintenance on existing infrastructure, and do that without creating buckets of fees for different things, but to your point, prioritizing the spending based on the greatest need at that point.
Exactly. I think that's what we elect our elected officials to do, is to make those policy judgments and prioritization of what are we going to spend money on. It's really, really easy to pull that one quote out and say, all right, it's $28 million a year in need, and we only have $7 million a year in funding, so we're going to have to increase that fee. I'm like, no, we don't. If there's nothing that's statutorily requires us to fund the 28 with the fees that are generating 7, then it's a policy decision.
Yep. Got it.
What I got out of and this is Richard speaking, is, but our fees, this was a designated fee for to go to the stormwater one, and we're relatively low compared, again, maybe my notes are wrong.
No,
we're relatively low compared to our peers. And, if this was a designated fee, need has outstripped revenue and our fees are relatively low. It seems that, at least for one thing, the stormwater issue, you could address it with a modest fee increase. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. That's what I took from the conversation. I agree with Todd about prioritization is just your highest and best need, but it just seems like it's a problem, or there's a solution to a problem if it's measured correctly.
I agree, Richard. That was my takeaway from that discussion. A question I have is, are we, in this report, are we okay to make a recommendation for a fee increase like that? I mean, or is that outside of our bounds?
We've used the report in the past, JC, to make those types of recommendations.
Okay.
I think we're giving cover to the council, saying we support it if the measurement is real, and they've listened to us in the past when we've talked about limiting X or Y. It seems if this problem is real and well measured, and I'm not sure it is. A 40-minute presentation, didn't necessarily answer every question, but if it's real and there is a solution, we're giving them cover to address a problem, which seems, since they've listened to us on other issues, seems giving them cover is a valid thing for us to do.
Okay, but
I agree.
if I step back, and I didn't get to hear all this particular presentation, so correct me if I'm wrong. The two things are not necessarily aligned, right? And they're not aligned because the fee preceded the need, right? And the change in the need. And because of the change in the need, the costs have exceeded what the fee was originally intended for. And that's why we have this gap, correct?
That's correct. The costs have
Okay.
been increasing.
So I think it's a little bit of both, Dr. Clinch. It's kind of, hey, here's a scenario where we probably do need to make a correction because we do have some sort of imbalance relative to the need versus the fee. But at the same time, every time we create a bucket in we limit the ability to reallocate those dollars in the event that a need is fulfilled. And so it's kind of, do what you need to do, to your point, modestly to adjust things, but at the same time, let's make sure we don't create too many silos that we can't, use dollars as other priorities come up.
I agree in principle. Is just if it's an existing fee and the unmet need.
Yeah, but the original fee was not developed for the current need, right? Legislation changed what the need was from what the fee was originally created for. We were maintaining one thing, and now we suddenly have to go, oh, now we have to rebuild and redo and do it completely different than it was originally intended.
I mean, I would argue that we had the responsibility before the fee was ever implemented.
Okay. All right.
And so the fact that then the fee was implemented, that's supposedly a dedicated fee, or hoped to be a dedicated fee, to me that's extra money. The county already had the obligation to maintain its infrastructure. The fact that there was no dedicated fee prior to that legislation being passed, the legislation just made it easier to cover the cost of maintaining that specific infrastructure. And now we're going to say, well, the fee needs to go up because it's not sufficient to cover the need. Well, the need was already there. So I don't like looking to that fee's supposed shortfall and using that as a reason to increase it, because now the need in maintaining our infrastructure has grown beyond what we had originally anticipated. I don't see it. I think it's a cop-out.
What I don't feel strongly about this. And again, this is Richard speaking. The issue is that stormwater issues, again, as opposed to other ones, are changing with climate, and therefore when it was designed however many years ago, and I don't really remember when it was, the need has in fact changed. So again, having a designated revenue for a need that at least seems real, and is in fact changing, as evidenced by the Ellicott City flooding and other things, seems reasonable to me. But I'm not going to hold up or ask that the group talk about this for an hour. It just seems like fiscally reasonable.
No, I think there's an approach to handle both, which is because I think we could focus on this particular, like the stormwater management thing, but I think to your point, Dr. Clinch, that's the, I guess, the impetus for the language. But at the same time, I still think there's room for saying there's lots of deferred maintenance going on.
Oh,
And if every time we think we have deferred maintenance on other things, and then we say, oh, let's create a fee for this or a fee for that. But I think we can craft language to kind of cover a little bit of both, and then we can come back to this when we're in the voting process.
no objection from me.
Okay.
I'm good, Steve.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Sorry. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the CIP and kind of the overall just those next two slides for me are kind of the same. It's that sustainable financial plan, and it's something we've talked about for a number of years. And I look at the list of things that are on the horizon for budget requests, especially on the capital projects, and it seems like there's not alignment in developing a sustainable financial plan and what we can afford, especially if we're recommending $75 million a year. There's only so much we can do with that $75 million, and if we're prioritizing. So I still recommend that we keep in this, develop a sustainable financial plan, out on in line with the revenue growth number. I mean, we're looking at recommending 5-year, or I guess 6-year, this year and the next 5 years after that. So we're looking at a 6-year revenue growth model. Why aren't we also recommending a 6-year, kind of rolling 6-year CIP model? And is there a way to kind of craft language around that? The two don't seem mutually exclusive to me.
No, I like the
They
idea.
seem inextricably bound together.
Yes. Yeah, but for some reason we don't group them together. We treat them as two separate things.
Yes, I agree. I'm agreeing.
Yeah, and I mean, it would be very interesting to look back on, 2 or 3 years ago when we were talking about, all right, we're going to add all of these rec and parks buildings. We're going to add this function and that function, and we don't even have enough money to staff all of our functions at our existing facilities. So how have we done? What are we doing?
Yeah, that's actually a good one.
As we've added,
we've ever asked that question.
We've added another senior center. How is that staffed? Do we staff it with with new positions, with new money? If we didn't staff it with new money, where did we take staff from? Where did we take dollars from on previously existing facilities? I mean, that was a long discussion for over a 2 or 3 year period, and I don't know where we've gotten with it.
Yeah, it's the cheaper thing is actually building the building, not running the building, right? Because you're going to be running the building for a long time, and those costs add up. And the question is, when you look at the capital plan, there's usually, and Holly, correct me if I'm wrong, there's an estimate of operating costs that are included in there that I think has been added in the last few years. And the question is, how close are we to hitting those numbers when we've opened these facilities? Are we coming in on budget on the operating costs, or have the operating costs been more expensive and they're crowding out other things?
Right. That's actually, I think the committee did mention that in the past on that. It is actually becoming an ongoing challenge there, because as everybody just pointed out, when we have new project completed facility, there need to be staffing, there will need to be supplies and other maintenance related stuff on that. So every year, our budget on operating side try to absorb relatively needs on that, but it really depends on whether there are multiple projects get finished or big ones get finished on capital side. It does add on top of the normal existing operating costs there. And depends on the year, some years more than others, but it can be sizable.
But the issue is, and this goes back to the aligning the two is, we kick off a project in the county this year that takes 3 fiscal years to be completed, or two fiscal years, but 3 calendar years to be completed, or, kind of gaps. You don't really start to see the operating impact for 3 years, as opposed to, oh yeah, go borrow that money, authorize that bond today. And I think the county's done a good job of cleaning up the old authorized but not yet issued number, and gotten that number down by removing projects from those numbers. But at the same time, if we don't align these two, the revenue out year revenue growth and the out year bond growth. I mean, we just looked at a schedule that showed, I think it was to 2036 or 33 in debt service, that we kind of need to align those things to make sure that we don't have a net, like, we're not being measured as a county on, we're measured on the percentage of the debt service to revenue, but there's not a net measurement, right? There's not a, well, what's the available debt service after these additional operating costs to really cover those things? We don't really, there's not a measurement number for that, unless you correct me that there is. I can't think of one.
But Steve, in actuality, it works the other way, because the debt service has to be paid first. So what's left to cover what you need to operate those buildings? And then the state says
either way, I agree. I 100% agree with you. I'm just saying, we're only looking at a revenue side to debt service, and we're saying, oh, we can afford that extra debt within what we have as an expense base today. But we're not saying, well, what's that expense base tomorrow? To your point, we're going to pay the debt first, but we're still going to have to pay. What does it cost to run a senior center?
And then on top of that, the state generally looks at the initial capital cost of a building is only, including the outfitting, site prep, construction, and outfitting, to be only 45% of what the capital cost on that building will be over its lifetime. So
is that for all buildings or just school buildings?
Well, it's for schools, but anything that's a public building comes pretty close to that.
Okay.
And so you're talking about having to then incur that cost again at a higher cost, because it's obviously not going to cost in this year's dollars over that lifetime to do the systemic renovations that will be necessary to keep it operating. So we in the past, we tend to think about this, project going forward, and we look at the operating cost and the debt services ongoing, but the capital's going to keep rearing its head too.
Yeah, it's almost like, I don't know, it's like you would want to layer on the present value of the future revenues and the present value of the future costs, and say, okay, if I added those to today and assume today, do I have enough money to move forward with this, as opposed to, that probably overcomplicates it, and it's math that nobody wants to have to think about.
Nobody wants to look at that, but that's a realistic, that's what we will be facing in 15 years, another hit on the capital side that relates to an existing building, which is systemic maintenance, which is capital, not operational maintenance.
Well, it really, it's just to recognize we have the ability
what the investment is going to cost us over time.
Yeah, but everything we look at on revenue increase assumes no modification.
Increase in expenses.
No. No modification of existing policies as it relates to tax and fees, right?
Yeah.
So, Holly, correct me if I'm wrong, the 4.5% next year and the 3.3s for fiscal year 26 to 30, that only includes using today's outline policies for tax and fees and pushing that out. And so we have the capabilities to change those numbers. We just had a conversation about the stormwater management fee and other fees that could adjust to do that. But from prudent fiscal planning, knowing that ahead of time probably makes sense, rather than having, and this goes into we used to talk about and I think it's been modeled a few times, Holly, the why am I forgetting the words? The gap between revenue and expenses.
Our structural deficit.
There you go. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. I guess it's been a long day of meetings. Yeah. So any structural deficits that arise, but those structural deficits only take into account the debt service, not the operating expenses.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with all the discussion here. I think there should be a way to more, I guess, explicitly both measure and show that they are embedded somewhere, like if you look at the 600 to 700 page of capital budget book, most of project, with exceptions, most projects there actually are showing the operating budget.
No, I'm saying they are, Holly. I'm
But-
agreeing that they are. I said that they weren't years
we
ago,
need
but
to
they are now.
putting
What
them
we're
on
not
the
doing is
left
including
side.
those in our
Yeah.
expenditure
Yeah.
picture
Yeah.
in the future.
And the
We're just
cost of
including them in
that.
this static
Yeah.
document.
Mm-hmm.
We're not layering in to say, with that $1.6 billion of revenue 2 years out, we've already spent $3.4 million to run XYZ facility.
Right.
Steve, the way you put it, I think was perfect, and I never really thought about it that way. But yeah, when you vote on a new senior center in fiscal 24 and you build it, and then you have to staff it starting in fiscal 27, and you voted for the new senior center because that's a really easy thing to vote for, but then you don't vote for the additional operating costs for that department to run that new senior center because, the police need a raise or the teachers need a raise. So we're not going to give Rec and Parks the additional money they need for the building that we decided to build back in fiscal 25.
Mm-hmm.
Or we're below in stormwater management fees, but we can't cover that gap with revenues because we've already allocated it as something we decided 3 years ago.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bringing it around for you, Todd. Just trying to bring it around for you.
Well, I want to share something for 30 seconds. My mom lives with my wife and I now, and she's at the senior center all the time over here in Glenwood. And the amount of volunteer hours that they ask her to do is unbelievable. She's 86 and she's in there all the time doing things. Will you do this? Can you help us with this lunch? Can you help us with the chairs afterwards? Can you help us with the book sale? And she does it because it's entertaining for her. It's a way to keep her days filled. But the number of hours that she is asked to give and then gives is amazing to me.
Yeah.
And my question is, if that's across the board,
thank you to your mom.
Across the county, yeah, no, I'm not looking for any praise. My point is just is that how we're filling the gaps?
I assume so.
Odd that we're seeing that in many of our nonprofits.
Yeah.
We've
talked about that before, right?
We've talked about that before. That is the way in which we're balancing some of this. And is that feasible and sustainable? And I think we would hear from both of them that it's not.
As the not-for-profit community in this, and Barbara's on the line, and I'm sure I'm cutting her off, so I'll stop talking.
Well, I just would like to comment that volunteer work is probably keeping your mother out of the hospital, keeping her going. My mother volunteered till she was 90, and it's unbelievable. It's actually a strategy for elderly people. And I think it's both. It does keep your costs down, but I don't want it to just be like an excuse for we're not funding staffing. I think it's much bigger than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not criticizing it, except that there's a vast difference between the county asking somebody to do that and the domestic violence center asking somebody to do that.
No, but Todd, I think, and we can stop after this because I think we have some ideas. But I think what we've talked about this before, and I think as a community, we have a very vibrant not-for-profit group of entities that support county services, unlike many other areas, and help us, fill needs within the community that other areas would have to pay through from their budget just alone.
Volunteer work gives purpose to people.
Yes, it does, and
there is-
we do a great job of it. At the end of the day, though, we still have to make sure that the things that have to be done are covered. So
Don't disagree, but I don't want that
No.
other piece to be lost in this
no,
conversation.
no, not at all. And just to be clear, Todd, I wasn't giving you praise; I was giving your mother praise.
Fair enough.
Okay, so I think we've gotten that one cleared up, and we'll go ahead and move on. Fund balance. So there was some discussion around the fund balance not being, although I think the county's done a good job of increasing fund balance, and the committee has referenced increasing fund balance in the past few reports. That maybe it needs to continue to happen. I didn't know if there was any dialogue on that the committee wanted to have today.
It's Ellen. I think it was really a comment by the financial advisors that in this particular area, we aren't as robust in comparison to our peers as we are in some other places. And while we've made advances, this may be something that the ratings groups are going to be looking at differently. And we're not ranked at the same place in comparison to our peers as we are in others. That's what I remember.
Okay. I'm sure we can come up with some language just to make sure that we maintain the growth there and maintain. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about maintaining our rating. Going back to the original, and fiscal responsibility, but going back to the original comment, a lot of this goes into that. And if we can maintain our rating, that'll help us keep interest rates down and allow us to continue to fund the needs of the community.
It also makes us eligible for things. You know, if you're a AAA bond rater, you get considered for other things, for federal funding, for state funding. It puts us in a different class and makes a difference as to what we can draw on. So it's more important than just the rate that we pay.
Right. Okay. So noted. All right. Any conversation on OPEB that we think we need to include in the report?
Could some help me with the acronym, Steve?
Other post-employment benefits.
What Ellen said.
You have
This
to
is the medical and retirement liabilities for the county.
Yeah, this is the retiree health benefit, pretty much. It's really, this is one of the FA presentation slides. They're basically saying we are doing more than the pay-as-you-go amount there, but they were suggesting when opportunity present itself, just continue to enhance that, because they show a little comparison with some other AAA counties, so we're not at the medium level yet. So they basically are saying, you know, they didn't really push too much. They just said if you can, try to.
And this number is not included in fund balance. It is deleted. It's netted out from fund balance. Correct, Holly?
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah. So basically, we cover our annual cost dollar for dollar in each budget. The question is, how much can we continue to put aside for future when the time comes that we can't cover those dollars? And Dr. Clinch would probably say that's what happens when communities slow down from growth.
Correct, which is where we may be headed. So I think what I took from the consultants' dialogue is we need to probably do a little bit better there, but it's not the number one priority.
It's not.
Is that accurate from other people's recollection?
Yeah, it's not critical, but it's important.
So I think we can simply say, and I don't remember the language from last year, continue to provide above pay-go.
Okay.
If that's agreed, and if that's a fair representation of what other people got from the presentation.
Yeah, it sounds like I'm not hearing anyone come up with anything different, Dr. Clinch. So, okay. Are there any other recommendations that we haven't talked about on this list that anybody on the committee would like us to include some language in the report?
I don't want to say it's a recommendation to include anything, but I do have a question. For years now, we've talked about a recommendation for making the committee a permanent committee. And every year,
Yes.
every year it's, yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. And then it goes away.
I think we actually put it in the report the last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's number one. Number two, the one thing that I thought there was actually traction on last year was this whole concept of doing a financial plan to match the master plan. And I mean, we even gave it a catchy little name, Howard County by the numbers or something like that. And again, I thought there was a great deal of interest there. Maybe I'm misreading it, but again, it just kind of went away. I mean, we made a presentation and that was that. So I don't know if we want to go back to those issues, and do we want to be proposing things like that again, or do we just give our report and be done with it?
Yeah, I still like the idea of this committee being an ongoing committee, just because things happen outside of the cycle. I always feel like we're condensed here, trying to get things done in a 2-month period of time, and a lot of stuff happens. We could dive deeper if we had, and I think the committee has done a really good job as a source for the county to dig into bigger issues, and if it's already there, ready to go, then we can solve it. So I would be supportive of putting some language about that in there, and I think we can include the other comment around, and I'm not sure what the catchy name was, but we can probably include that because that goes in line with the sustainable, like the financial plan.
Yeah, Steve,
Yeah,
maybe as part of the report writing exercise, it's this is going to come back to the full group for a final vote. Maybe have the writing group break out last year's report, and if there's anything that's caught in there, like the suggestion that Todd had, just plug it in, and it can obviously be brought back up for discussion before final vote on the report.
Yeah, absolutely. Good idea. Okay. Anything else?
This feels like, opening up a little bit of a can of worms at 4:10, so please don't take it that way. But I feel like we should say something about the school system this year. It struck me, I don't know if it did many of you, the kind of a wild swing on, projection between this year and last year's presentation. And we can maybe cover it in one of these other categories as an example of, like the need for a sustainable 6-year financial plan. Maybe that's where it should park. But that just kind of stuck out as a sore thumb to me. But curious what others think.
Yeah, I think when you look at the last few years of developing what I think was quoted as an aspirational funding plan, and now moving into more realistic, this is what we have in front of us to deal with based on building out the aspirational and not getting the growth. I think we do need to say something. Anybody else in the committee have some comments on that?
I actually thought progress was made this year in that they at least were already starting to think about what to do when the inevitable happened, as opposed to just throwing out an aspirational plan, knowing good and darn well it was not going to fly. I've seen some discussions at some of the Board of Ed meetings about, unfortunately, certain cuts and changes, but at least they seem to be more ahead of it than they have been in the past. So I took that as a positive.
Can I
Good
add
point.
It's Ellen. Okay, the big impetus here is that there's no increase in maintenance of effort. There's actually a loss in maintenance of effort. So what they're asking for is sort of a recovery to previous levels. The 47 million takes you to about where you were in 19.
Which is where they've been trying to get for the last couple of years. What's the dollar amount gap, Ellen? Do you know that?
40 some odd million dollars that they're losing because their enrollment figure
because of enrollment.
And this is where, as it always has been, is almost so densely complex that you can't make sense of it. But essentially, we have not recovered to the 2019 enrollment numbers.
And there was a pass for a few years because of,
right. So for 3 years they were held harmless. So for 3 years, they continued to get something on the order of $37 million more than was available under maintenance of effort. They were held harmless at that level, and they've recovered little of that. We're still 1,000 below. And what happened last year is they had to accept the drop, but you're allowed to do maintenance of effort on either the previous year or the average of the previous 3 years. So they're able to still use the 19 numbers to level it out. Now that doesn't help them because they're removed from that and it would be lower. So using last year's means a loss of something around 40 something odd $million. So what they're asking for is 47 million over maintenance of effort because maintenance of effort has dropped. And then using the remainder of their fund balance, which is about $10.8 million, I think. And that still then sets maintenance of effort for next year, $47 million higher.
I think that's partially right, but not exactly, because what happens, the maintenance effort is not a drop of $47 million. The maintenance effort is a drop of $6 million. So of the 47 million increase they asked from the county, only a small portion is to make up for the maintenance effort drop. The most is as an increase. But part of the reason, as you said, is there are all kinds of needs and also the priorities on that, which compared to the resources there, they ask for more county contribution for that. So
it's still a
$50
million increase in maintenance of effort, because once you do that, except for the fund balance, that's what the base is for next year.
Right. So whatever the county funding will become the new base for the following year, right?
Yeah.
26. Yeah. But this is a good point. Like still probably because in the past committee did talk about the school funding because that's one part of the.
Well, it's the largest expenditure.
Yeah.
It's hard to not talk about it.
Right. So we need to make sure put some description.
So JC bringing it up is the right thing to do, and I think we can craft some language around that.
And there is planned to be an increase in state funding but the state has a deficit. So what's actually going to be funded is still going to be an issue for the.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting a lengthy kind of deep
Just
dive in, it's just that it's the maintenance of effort plus, the cost of the blueprint and, Steve, what you just said, it's the largest share of our, it's our biggest expenditure. So it just merits a better focus, I think.
Well, especially given everything else, right? It's one of those things that, you can only do so many, we only have so many dollars.
Well, if we're talking about 62 and they're asking for 47, that's where we are.
Right.
Hey, less than, the other way around like last year. So
when it was 150, yeah.
They're trending in the right direction, if nothing else.
All right. Anything else? Any other recommendations that we want to include? Okay. All right. Well, this has been a really good conversation. I think we'll endeavor to get a report out by the 23rd, 24th, no, 22nd, 23rd. That'll give everybody time to review it ahead of time of a vote on the 26th, and then hopefully we can get that done. If not, we do have another meeting on the calendars just in case we need a little more time. So I think we are good. Holly, is anything else you want to cover today?
No, I think this is a great discussion.
No, I appreciate everybody being part of the discussion and being open with some ideas and suggestions. And I thought it was a really, really good discussion.
To quickly and to clarify, so the Wednesday meeting we no longer need, right? Because
correct, we no longer need the Wednesday meeting.
We don't need that.
We've gotten through everything in an hour and 17 minutes, even with JC bringing something up at 4:10.
Sorry.
No, it was good. It's glad we didn't miss
discussion.
You do not get to remain under the bus.
Yeah.
Been rescued.
Okay. All right. So we'll get this report put together and out to everybody, hopefully within 10 days, which will give everybody time to review it, and then we'll have a good, hopefully a good dialogue on the 26th, and our mission will have been accomplished. And with that, I will give everybody back their time for the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody have a great one.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Holly.
Thank you.